year ago, America fell in love with a singing janitor from Terre Haute.
Oh, Richard Goodall won, you might remember, America's Got Talent.
For 23 years, a man in a gray uniform pushed a mop bucket down the same hallway, hummed classic rock under his breath, and figured that was simply going to be his whole life. Then a phone camera caught him mid-song, and nothing about that plan held up. Today, at 56 years old, Richard Goodall has finally said out loud what so many people who followed his story had already started to suspect, that the janitor's uniform was never really who he was, and the microphone was. Richard Goodall grew up in Indiana and settled in Terre Haute, where he built the kind of life that rarely makes headlines. He worked as a custodian for the Vigo County School Corporation, most recently at West Vigo Middle School, cleaning classrooms, wiping down cafeteria tables, and greeting students every morning. He worked as a school janitor with the Vigo County School Corporation for 23 years. Music was always tucked into the edges of that routine rather than sitting at the center of it. He sang in choirs, at karaoke nights, and in gospel trios over the years, treating it as something that brought him joy rather than a career he was actively chasing. People who knew him back then often said his voice felt far too big for the small rooms he happened to be singing in, but for a long time, that was just a quiet fact about him rather than a plan for the future. Everything shifted in 2022. Goodall had a habit of singing while he worked, partly to entertain himself and partly to make the students smile, and one of those ordinary moments happened to get filmed. A video of him performing Journey's Don't Stop Believin' for students went viral online in 2022, and outlets like Fox News and ABC News picked up the clip. He hadn't planned any of it and didn't ask for the attention, but within days strangers across the country were watching a janitor from Terre Haute sing like he'd trained for it his whole life. It turned out that wasn't his first attempt at being noticed, either. Long before that video existed, he had tried out for another television singing competition and come away with nothing, no callback, no encouragement, just silence. He went back to his job without much fuss, treating it as one more example of how dreams don't usually reward people the first time they reach for them. 2 years passed before that viral clip actually turned into an opportunity. He was discovered by AGT judge Howie Mandel from that viral social media post of him singing to an assembly at his middle school, and producers eventually reached out. In May 2024, Goodall did something he had never done in his entire life. He got on an airplane. He had never even been on a plane before, and had never traveled west of Missouri. So the trip to Los Angeles alone was already a bigger leap than most people watching at home probably realized. He wasn't chasing fame in any calculated way. He was a 55-year-old man in a plain shirt walking into a room full of judges who, by his own account later, weren't expecting much from him before he opened his mouth. Then he sang. His rendition of Don't Stop Believin' hit notes that are genuinely difficult for trained professionals, let alone a school custodian who'd never performed for a national audience, and the room reacted instantly. Judge Heidi Klum hit her golden buzzer, sending him straight past the usual audition rounds and into the live shows without hesitation. Simon Cowell, not usually one for sentimental language, later called him his hero, and reportedly told him the audience needed exactly the kind of hope he represented. It's the sort of moment that gets replayed constantly online because it captures something rare, a person's entire circumstance changing in the space of about 90 seconds. From there, Goodall built a run through the season that felt less like a competition strategy, and more like a man working through his own life story one song at a time. He dedicated his quarterfinal cover of Michael Bolton's How Am I Supposed to Live Without You to Angie Van Oven, the woman who by then had become the steady presence in his life. In the semifinals, he leaned into Survivor's Eye of the Tiger, a song he reportedly landed on after watching a Rocky Marathon in his hotel room and talking it over with Angie on the phone. By the finale, he performed Journey's Faithfully, a song that held personal meaning for the couple, and the room responded the way rooms tend to respond when someone sings like their life depends on it. When the season ended, Richard Goodall was named the winner, becoming the first singer to take the title in 5 years and one of the oldest champions the show has ever crowned. It was the kind of ending reality competitions are built around, but the parts of his life that got him to that stage were far heavier than anything captured in the highlight reel. Long before America ever heard his name, Goodall had lived through a loss that reshaped him completely. He had been a personal caregiver to his first wife, Patty, as she fought terminal kidney cancer, and she died in 2021. He later said it nearly broke him, and admitted he'd never been through anything like caring for someone he loved through a terminal illness. He described the aftermath simply, saying that when you're married for so long and someone passes, your biggest concern becomes figuring out who you are without them. Grief like that doesn't announce itself loudly in daily life, but those closest to him noticed the weight it added to his voice whenever he sang afterward. What eventually pulled him back toward music wasn't a grand plan. A fellow janitor posted on Facebook about a bar hosting karaoke a few months after his wife's death, and that small nudge got him singing publicly again. It was through that same bar's Facebook page that Angie Vanoven first noticed him. The two started talking on New Year's Day 2022, and what began as an online connection turned into the relationship that carried him through the entire whirlwind of his America's Got Talent season. She wasn't in his life because of a viral video or television contract. She met him as a widower and a janitor first, long before anyone else in the country knew his name. Just days before the season finale, Goodall and Angie made their relationship official. They married in Pasadena, California, on September 18, 2024, 6 days before he was announced as the winner of season 19. He shared the news himself, writing that as of 3 p.m. Pacific time, he and Angie were officially married, and followed it up with photos from a beachside dinner in Malibu with members of his AGT circle in attendance. It wasn't staged for cameras. It was a private decision made in the middle of the biggest, most public stretch of his life, which says something about how he chose to handle fame from the very beginning. Angie's influence on Goodall's story didn't stop at the altar. She encouraged him to finally look into a question he had carried quietly since childhood, the identity of his biological father, a mystery that had followed him ever since he learned he was adopted as an infant. Using an ancestry service, Vanoven worked to track down his biological father and also located 3 siblings, a brother and 2 sisters, describing the search as one that involved hitting a lot of dead ends before finally getting answers. The man they found was named Hubert, a retired K-9 police officer and Army veteran living in Indiana. Hubert had no idea Goodall existed at all, and had never been told he had a son. Remarkably, Hubert reportedly recognized his son from television before they ever formally connected, having seen the singing janitor's face during his America's Got Talent run and suspecting there was more to the resemblance than coincidence. Goodall later recounted that his father asked him directly if he was that same janitor guy from the show, still stunned that after decades of not knowing he had a child, that child turned out to be someone he'd already watched on national television. Goodall shared the discovery publicly himself, posting a photo with his newfound father and introducing him to fans directly. He wrote that thanks to ancestry testing and Angie, he had found his biological father, a retired K-9 officer in Indianapolis and an Army veteran who had no other children. He made a point of crediting his wife for the entire search, saying plainly that without her, he likely never would have gone looking in the first place. For a man who had spent most of his adult life making peace with an unanswered chapter of his own history, meeting Hubert gave him something he'd stopped expecting to find, an actual living connection to the other half of where he came from. Winning a national talent competition and uncovering a hidden family might have been enough change for most people to handle in a single year, but Goodall's story didn't slow down after the confetti settled. What surprised a lot of people was what he did next, which was essentially nothing dramatic at all. He went back to work. A year after his win, he was still showing up at the school, still cleaning, still receiving support from the same community that had backed him from the beginning. He kept signing autographs and taking photos with people at the local grocery store, staying rooted in the same town that raised him. When asked why he didn't simply walk away from custodial work the moment the prize money hit his account, his answer was straightforward. He still loved the students, the staff, and the structure that job had given him for over 2 decades. That same hometown had shown up for him well before any winner's check existed. When AGT first flew him out to Los Angeles for his audition, it wasn't a corporation covering the cost of getting him there. It was neighbors, co-workers, and strangers who'd seen his viral video pooling money together through local fundraising, so a school janitor could make it to a stage most people only dream about. Tay Oat later gave him a key to the city, and his school held a celebration filled with cheering students and staff who had watched the entire journey unfold in real time, right down the hallway from where they worked every day. New opportunities kept stacking up alongside that ordinary routine. He performed at Indianapolis's Circle of Lights, sang the national anthem at an Indiana Pacers game, appeared at the Festival of Lights at the Mission Inn in Riverside, California, and opened for fellow AGT favorite Howie Mandel at a casino resort near Palm Desert. Yet on the days in between, he was still punching in at West Vigo Middle School, still mopping the same floors he'd mopped for over 20 years. By his own description, he was letting the entertainment side of his life build slowly rather than rushing into anything, treating it as something to wait and see on rather than a guaranteed new career. Rather than jumping straight into a record deal, Goodall approached his music with the same patience he'd shown his entire life. He released his debut single, Long Time Coming, on August 29th, recorded in Nashville, and also joined a local band called Sugar Street, using smaller shows to grow as an artist without the pressure of network television watching his every move. In August 2025, he returned to the America's Got Talent stage for the show's 20th anniversary special, opening the night with a performance of Survivor's Eye of the Tiger, which he later said felt like being part of a production bigger than anything he'd experienced before. He went on to perform Long Time Coming during the season 20 finale alongside Journey guitarist Neil Schon, tying his current music directly back to the song that had started the entire journey in a school cafeteria years earlier. For a long stretch, Goodall balanced two completely different identities, a school employee by day and a touring performer whenever the calendar allowed it. He told an interviewer in June 2025 that he was still at the school, that things were happening behind the scenes with concerts popping up, and that he intended to keep working at the school for as long as he could. That balance, though, was never going to last forever, and by the summer of 2026, it finally tipped. Richard Goodall retired from his job as a janitor at the Vigo County School Corporation, closing out a chapter that had defined more than 2 decades of his life. He ended his custodial career at the close of the 2026 school year, explaining simply that the end of that particular school year just seemed to make more sense than continuing on. It wasn't framed as an easy decision. Walking those hallways for the final time, past the same cafeteria where a phone camera had once quietly changed his life, reportedly hit him harder than he expected. Entertainment doesn't come with the security of a steady paycheck and a pension, and stepping away from a job that had structured his mornings for 23 years took a kind of courage that's easy to overlook when you're only watching the highlight reel. What pushed him to finally make that leap wasn't just the music. It was a phone call about his own life story. Goodall is now at the center of a feature film deal with Everard Entertainment and Mad Chance, with Everard's Ben Everard and Mad Chance's Andrew Laza producing. The script is being written by Chris Parisot, a screenwriter twice recognized on the blacklist. Goodall said he was contacted by Ben Everard through Howie Mandel not long after his AGT win, and that after signing the deal, the team quickly put together a script and began shopping it to agents, directors, and potential actors. He's chosen to stay out of the creative weeds himself, trusting the people building the film to shape his story rather than trying to control every detail. Producer Andrew Laza described the project as a story about never giving up on your dreams no matter your circumstances or your age, adding that he believes it will resonate with audiences everywhere. There's something almost poetic about the timing of it all. The film deal became public right around the same point Goodall officially closed out his janitorial career, meaning the two biggest transitions of his adult life landed in the same season. Goodall himself seemed both amused and genuinely moved by the whole thing, saying it was flattering that someone reached out wanting to turn his life into a movie, and that being on AGT alone had already felt surreal enough. No firm timeline exists yet for when the film will actually reach a screen, and no casting has been announced, but the wheels are officially in motion for a story that started with a mop bucket and a phone camera nobody asked to be there. What makes Goodall's arc land the way it does isn't just the scale of what happened to him. It's the order in which it happened. He didn't get discovered, get famous, and then discover meaning. He built the meaning first, through decades of showing up for a job that asked very little glamour of him, through grief he carried privately while still clocking in every morning, and through years of singing simply because it felt good, not because anyone was paying him to. The fame came second, almost as an afterthought to a life that was already whole in its own quiet way. So when people say Goodall has finally admitted what everyone suspected, what they usually mean is this: the singing was never a side effect of a lucky break. It was the truest thing about him the entire time. Sitting right there under a work uniform for over 20 years, waiting for one video to catch up to what his community, his students, and eventually his biological father had already noticed on their own. He didn't need a golden buzzer to become who he is. He just needed the rest of the world to finally see it. From a Tay-Oat cafeteria to a golden buzzer. From losing a wife to finding a father he never knew existed. From mopping floors to signing a movie deal about his own life, Richard Goodall's story keeps circling back to the same idea. Ordinary routines can hide something extraordinary for a very long time, and sometimes all it takes for the world to notice is one person filming a moment nobody thought was special enough to matter. At 56, Goodall isn't chasing a comeback or reinventing himself. He's simply stepping fully into the version of his life that was quietly building the entire time, one whole way, one song, and one hard year at a time.